Bench Opinions. Three idiots with amateur analysis.
Hello and welcome to Bench Opinions. We are celebrating Dominic's birthday this week. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
So for those of you who are watching it on the day of release, his birthday was yesterday. 33.
It's true.
Don't look a day over 34.
Exactly, bro. That's what I always go for.
Nice. I see a little bit of grey coming in the beard there.
Yeah, but it's because of you and Maxi, so...
It stress you out.
Yeah, it's just too much.
But be honest now, is it us stressing you out or is it Man United stressing you out?
Good question. Man United, the stress level with Man United is a bit low at the moment because there's an element of acceptance. I think by Thursday, though, the stress will be a bit higher because we're in a European semi-final and with a lot on the line. So that'll be, I think, a little bit more stressful. Look forward to that.
From the two teams that you support, HSV in the Bundesliga or in the second division, and Man United, which team moves you more?
Well, it goes through moments. So, like, I've just explained my sort of stance on United at the moment. Hamburg are stressing me out a little bit more at the moment because they were cruising to getting promoted for the first time in 7 years. And luckily still have a 3-point advantage over the team in third. But they lost on the weekend, and they lost last weekend as well. No, they drew 2-2 last weekend. So in layman's terms, they seem to be shitting the bed a bit, which is very nerve-wracking because there isn't... this is the closest we've come. So there's 3 games left. We have a 3-point advantage. You would think, though, if we just win one more game, we've got it. But it's not exactly the smooth sail into the first division that we wanted. So at the moment, they're a bit more stress. But I don't catch us. We all only have so many hours in a day, and to watch two teams every time they play every week is a bit much. So United tends to have a little bit more of my heart.
So HSV currently
second.
Sorry, currently second. 3 games to go. 3 points ahead
of third. Yeah,
and first real opportunity in 7 years. That's a lot of numbers.
Yeah,
and I think that's a good segue into what we want to be talking about today, and that's technology in football and the different pros and cons of the technologies that are being developed. Just run me through a couple of the sort of top technologies that teams are using.
So just to give a bit of context, though, a little bit more before we get into that, is there's been a few issues this week that have brought, I would say, technology relevance into the spotlight even more than it's already been happening. So United announced this week that they're cutting their scouting department by like 40%, so pretty big number, moving to a way more data-driven approach to scouting. And there's also big rumors, and it seems to be happening, that from next year, the Mercedes-Benz Formula One team's data analyst, obviously also co-owned by Ineos, so there's co-ownership, is probably going to be brought into United to do all the data analysis and the structuring around data at the club, which is very interesting to see that there's data so universal that there's a crossover, or they see the potential for some crossover there. Real Madrid lost to Barcelona and are miles behind in the La Liga, and they lost in the cup final this weekend, 3-2, albeit 3-2, pretty close game, crazy scenes. Go watch the highlights. 3 red cards at full time and everything, madness. Tensions definitely boiled over. But then there was an interesting picture from a journalist in Spain of the Barcelona technical team that sit in the stands and the Real Madrid technical team that sit in the stands. Barcelona had 7 analysts of data and video in the stands working on laptops, plus a camera guy. And Real Madrid only had 2 guys on laptops. And there's apparently been a big question marks over why Real Madrid is not moving with the times and getting more data in, and people saying that could be at least one part of the edge that Barcelona have over Real Madrid. So a lot of like big talking points this week around it, and so then I was like, this is very interesting. Let me dive into some of the things that they're doing. So AI is a big thing, and it's a big thing for all of us, of course. Hopefully, if it's not yet in your life, definitely make sure you don't miss that bandwagon.
Miss the boat.
Don't use Google. Use chat. Use an AI tool. It's way better. Or use Google's AI tool. But you know what I mean. A whole bunch of things that are actually pretty crazy if you think about it. One thing is AI scouting. So that's a big thing. So traditionally, scouting was like this. You had a central guy. We actually played with Hertha Berlin's chief scout recently.
Chief scout.
And he gave a bit of insight as well. But usually what it was is just ears on the ground in different regions across the world. So obviously you will build relationships, personal relationships with different clubs in South America, Africa, and all across the world, and look into how you can discover talent. Now there's an approach of there's an AI tool that has developed what they believe is the most sound way of measuring the talent of a footballer through different exercises, then having a set of metrics that are really, really crucial to the different developmental phases of footballers, and they're trying to standardize the kind of testing that's done and the kind of drills that are done worldwide, and then this goes into a global database and people are essentially scored. And that's a way of, I guess, at least in the first 2 or 3 steps of scouting players, of knowing where to go, what players to watch live in the flesh. So that's a very interesting way of doing it. Yeah.
So you've got scouting, you've got injury prevention.
Injury prevention is another big one. I think this is the coolest one, to be honest. For me personally, I think just because it's such a good thing for the players. So
also probably be able to adapt it to sort of the common folk, right?
Exactly, yeah. So you essentially just have, what they've done is they track players' minutes and which league they play in, and like what are the most prevalent injuries in that league, and at what time of the season do these injuries happen, how many niggles do players get, how much training do they do, blah blah blah. And they've created this massive sort of database to help prevent injuries, so allowing coaches to rest players at the right time, understanding, okay, after an injury, how long should we rest them, or how should we phase them back in? So that's really interesting as well. And apparently there's been a few cases already in Europe's top 5 leagues this season where players have been rested purely off the back of AI generated information.
And then the final big one is video analysis, both in training, I assume, but also in video analysis during the game and penalties and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. So it's super, like when you read and hear about any football managers or analysts or anything, they breathe football 24/7, and they're up until 2-3 in the morning, like analyzing things, trying to look for a gap in their opponents, etc. And I think a big part of that is just the pure time it takes to look at rewatch a 90-minute game of your opponents and identify patterns. There are AI tools now that sort of, they say, cut this time down from 300 hours. I don't know if this is for one game or if this is in a season, down to 4 hours. So, you can prompt the AI video analysis tool to like scan the movement patterns of a striker, of the strikers from a particular team, from all the footage, and detect patterns, for example. From what I read, it's still really, really vital to, so the prompts have to be right, or like any AI. The prompts have to be really right, and you have to understand it. Like any tool, it's only as good as its user. But apparently that's been a game changer for a lot of the teams. And obviously to remedy that, of course, you have to still come up with a way to remedy, like to kind of counteract whatever the AI tool is feeding you from your own team. But that's generally the gist of AI video analysis tools.
I don't want to come across as a boomer, but I would like to try and play devil's advocate in the sense that, AI being involved in any aspect of life is going to have its pros and cons, whether it be loss of jobs or whether it be advancements in technology, it could go either way. In football, which is maybe not vital to the survival of the human race in that regard, and it was more of an entertainment. I guess a lot of controversy would come up with regards to the purists on one side saying this is going against sort of the nature of the sport, and the other fraction saying we're utilizing the technologies at hand to advance the sport in many different aspects.
So, I think there's different ways of looking at it. I think this year there's been a lot of clear criticism of the way the football is played in the Premier League, and particularly in the Premier League, because people feel like it's become very robotic and players are not implored anymore to show their creativity and play outside of this mold, And I can can sympathize with that. I definitely can, because I think this is my next point. I think if you're judging everyone on the same metrics, you're gonna just create a bunch of the same. I believe, and if you set those metrics to a certain thing, the dudes that excel at those metrics are going to eventually break into be scouted and found. And over the last 20 years, I can name a lot of footballers to you that should never have, probably have completely broken the mold, and that's what. And if you looked at their chances on paper, would never have been professional footballers. But they, for whatever reason, they've been able to push them ways to the front. Based on pure talent or grit or mentality. There's just so many metrics outside of what I think these funnels will be. I think they're from what I can tell, they're quite narrow, at least in the first instance. So I ask myself, if you're not closing the door to rough diamonds, and those rough diamonds are the characters and the people that generally people latch onto, who people go, wow, this is incredible. Someone like Peter Crouch, who's the most, he was asked once, what would you be if you weren't a footballer? And he would have said, a virgin. And that's what he said. And he should have never been a footballer, but he was if you looked at him and you judged him on face value, but he was an incredible striker in the Premier League for many years. Yeah. So I argue that you might lose that. And I can sympathize with that. My biggest thing is the juxtaposition between it being an equalizer. So if you can perform at these metrics, you have a chance. I like that, because it does take a little bit of the gray zone and the political element of football out of it to a certain degree. And you've seen it in football clubs being able to compete purely off their use of data. A lot of clubs have listen, we don't have the resources to have 100 scouts. So we're going to find the next best option. And clubs like Brentford, they've punched above their weight for a lot of years because they drive innovation in this space. They use a Moneyball approach. If you don't know it, watch Moneyball, the movie with Brad Pitt, about the Oakland A's, where they use purely numbers to kind of find the right players and often identify people that weren't on certain radars. My big concern, though, is I do worry about inclusion. I worry about how you can roll this out in continents like Africa, for example. And if African structures have access to these platforms, I guess because Africa does have so much potential in terms of youth development and talent coming out of the African continent, my assumption is that these AI companies are totally in those regions, looking to gather data there and get as many of the more established clubs on board. I would hope. But I do worry about that a little bit.
What about the actual refereeing of the game? There's a lot of talk with using AI to define offside lines, handballs, that kind of stuff. Does that take away from the bit of controversy, which also makes the sport so interesting?
I think no, because I think there's just as much controversy surrounding it and the use of it, particularly in the UK, in the Premier League. Funny enough, the controversy is more about its implementation and how they still make mistakes. I think if you... And people are just face palming because they're like, how can you have all of this technology and still make such an abundant amount of mistakes?
Right.
And then also the handling of it, I think by the PGMOL, we've discussed it before. The handling of it is more the controversial point, is that they will first deny, for example, right after the game, and then come out a week later and apologize and issue an apology. But it doesn't change the outcome of the game, and points are lost by teams that probably shouldn't have. United's game yesterday, same thing. There was a shocking challenge in the first half by a Bournemouth player, and VAR looked at it in slow-mo, and it was terrible, and decided not to do anything, and no one kind of can understand it. Bournemouth got a red card in the second half for exactly the same tackle, which doesn't make it better. But yeah, I think the controversy is maybe more of a distraction, actually. And you could argue that if that controversy were to disappear and all decisions were super robotic and stuff, maybe it takes a bit of the flair out of it.
One team that would definitely be supportive of it is Arsenal, as they constantly believe that they've got a vendetta out against them.
They're a little bit
conspiracy.
They're a little bit whiny. They've got a big game coming up this Wednesday as well. I think it's Wednesday against PSG in the Champions League. I think they're throwing all their coins into that hat, or their whatever eggs into that basket. But yeah, there has been the lack of consistency is just not. It's just unfathomable that you can be so inconsistent using technology. So I think that's going to be the interesting approach as well. And I think there will still be in scouting and even in the use of data, there will be people that find niches outside of it still, and say, hey, with everyone switching, because it's the easy route or the cheaper route, with everyone switching to AI, I'm going to go try and find players outside of those spheres. But United, for example, as well, their whole rebuild is going to be based off at least as a good base is going to be done off the back of sound data. Yeah, for sure.
Look, the sports need to constantly be reinventing themselves and going with the times. So it's definitely interesting to see how that is going to progress in the future. And these AIs technologies are in themselves becoming faster and better and coming up with new technologies at an alarming rate almost. So it would be interesting to see in the next 5 to 10 years what technologies exist that we couldn't even fathom about now.
Yeah, 100%. I do need to give one little shout out before we wrap to Fiona, who's a very staunch listener of the podcast. We spoke about academies last week, and I spoke about PSG surprising me, that they were quite high up on the list of academy output. She was very kind, and I waited for this moment to say thank you to her. She sent me a podcast, and we can maybe link it in the description. She sent me a podcast around Paris.
Okay.
And how insane Paris is as a bedrock of sporting talent, with the makeup of its socio-economic makeup and the amount of immigration that's happened into that area with people that with football mad people, really referencing Kylian Mbappe's emergence, for example. So big thank you to Fiona for enlightening me, and I shouldn't be surprised, but now I know I shouldn't be surprised. So I will link it in the description. You can check it out.
And if you'd like to feature in our podcast, send us good information, good links.
Yeah.
No, all jokes aside, let us know in the comments which technologies you might think are quite interesting, or if you're super against it. That would also be an interesting conversation to have. Thanks for coming in on your birthday.
No worries, man.
I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I know that we're going to go play some golf later.
Exactly. So
hopefully I'll wipe the floor with you.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Actually, it's nice that you bring that up. We'll do a little game. We'll let you guys know how it went next week.
And please like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends, and have a lovely day.
Arrivederci.
Bye-bye.